Welcome to the Feminist Wellbeing Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Dodier, non-diet nutritionist, certified intuitive eating counselor, and cognitive behavior coach. And I've earned a PhD in diet culture. And at the age of 40, I graduated from a 25-year dieting career, and I said no more. And I'm here today to guide you on how to feel damn good by reshaping your mind instead of your body. And this podcast, we're fighting diet culture and patriarchy by living powerfully. Today, it's going to be about advocating for yourself. And we're going to talk about power, but probably in a completely different way you've never thought about power. And I'm going to tell you about my latest doctor visit and how it led me to realize that I am the ally to my body today. A lot of things. I'm going to give you some context and we're going to get right into it so it doesn't turn into an hour and a half podcast. I'm recording this on the date of September 5th, 2024. And in the summer of 2024, I went into a trip around the world. So I live in Canada and I went on a trip into Indonesia, which, if you've never done the trip, it's a typically 25 to 30 hour time in a plane, usually takes 2 full days of travel. It's quite far away. It was my first time traveling that far. I'm an astute traveler, but I had never gone that far, and I don't think there's any further point in the world that I can go to, which then created for me a circumstance that I came back from there in the first week of August and had a health incident. I had a phlebitis. Now, phlebitis is, if you don't know, an inflammation of the deep vein, typically in your arms or your lower legs. And there's a blood clot that forms itself in that inflamed vein. There's different reason why people have phlebitis, but one of the risk factors associated with phlebitis is long travel, like I've done, which means when you travel for that long, you stay seated in an airplane for a very long time, which has effect on your body. And one of them could be the risk of a blood clot or what is known as a phlebitis. And I ended up having one of those things. So I ended up in emergency care 3 days after coming back from my trip and being diagnosed by an emergency care physician with phlebitis. And as you know, the treatment of an emergency care situation happens with a different doctor. I think that's very similar around the world. You go to the emerge, you get a doctor, and you end up with another doctor that does the follow-up. And that doctor was not in Canada anyway. It's not our physician. It's called an internist who specialize in investigating why people end up with, in my case, a phlebitis. They're expert into investigation. So my recent visit, doctor, was the follow-up a month after the emergency care visit. And I just want to say, during the emergency care visit, not one time was my weight mentioned. Not one time was I ever felt like my weight was an issue. So, by the way, if you're new here, I'm a fat woman. I live in a body that is very tall. I'm 6 foot tall and very wide. I won't give a weight and scale, but I typically will wear a size 20 pants and a size 18 to 20 top. Just to give you perspective, like you cannot miss that I'm fat when you see me. Like between my height and my width, like I'm there, I'm present. But not one time was that mentioned or was that ever made me feel uncomfortable throughout the emergency care visit and appointment that I had. But I went to this follow-up appointment And it was very interesting. It was like the universe wanted me to have this experience with different perspective. I ended up with a student physician, a resident who studied internal medicine. And so I ended up first with them, and we spent almost half an hour, him asking me questions, me telling him about my history, my medical history. And it was a young man. He was 26 years old, literally still in school, graduating a year from now from medicine. And again, not one time throughout the appointment was my weight mentioned other than at the end. And this is where it begins to be interesting. He says, I've asked you all the question that I need to ask, but I need to ask this question because it has to be on my form, and I need to ask you about your BMI. He says, before you say anything, I know this is total bullshit. And he literally said those words. I know it's total bullshit. And I know it has no place in healthcare. And I studied it and I know this. However, the form and the system requires me to ask for it. So, do you know your BMI? And I looked at him and I said, I have no idea, and I'm not getting on the scale. He started laughing. He wrote unknown, and that was the end of the conversation. And he said, now I have to go present your case, your file, to my supervisor. He said, I'm 99% sure that the reason why you had a phlebitis was because of the long flight. All the result of the blood tests we did and everything else does not indicate any other condition than the long flight and the fact that you take birth control pill. I'm like, okay. And he left the room. 10 minutes later, he comes back with his supervisor. And this is where it gets interesting. The supervisor walked in and says, hi, my name is Marie-Claire. I'm Stephanie. Nice to meet you. And then right away, guess what happened? My weight became a problem. Not the fact that I was on birth control pill, not the fact that I had done a long travel. Right away, she said, well, your obesity is a problem. And I'm going to mention the word obesity throughout this podcast. So if you do have this as being a trigger for you, you perhaps want to stop listening at this point. So right away, this is what needed to happen, and you need to lose weight. I'm going to pause here and say, I have been around the block on this topic. I'm a professional in the world of weight neutral health. I'm a weight neutral health practitioner, weight inclusive health practitioner. I have a medical background. I have studied 2 diplomas in science and in health. I coach people for the last 8 years. So I have a knowledge base that's greater than most people. And I talk about this like every day for the last eight years now. So what I'm about to share with you of what happened in the appointment, I totally recognize that this is not likely how perhaps you would be able to handle this situation yet. And I hope that if you're not, that you come and either coach with me or train with me or my team, and we're going to get you to that place where you will be able to talk about and advocate for yourself. So go back to the story. The supervisor walked in, the supervising physician walks in, says you need to lose weight. It's because of your weight. And then Stephanie, being Stephanie, moves into advocating for herself because she is not going, I'm talking to myself about the third person, I am not going to let myself be stigmatized. And the information that she's sending me is absolutely outdated and false. So I have like all the ammunition for me to go into this beautiful debate with her. And I like a good fight. Like I'm the type of person, not a good fight in the physical fight, but I like a good debate. Like I'm a debater. I've been a debater for years. So as soon as she mentioned that, I let her finish her sentence. And then she ends her sentence. She looks at me thinking I'm going to say, how do I lose weight? And I said, you really want to go there? And she's like, what do you mean? She's like, really? Okay. I'm like, just be ready because we're going there. We're going to talk about this and we're going to talk about this in depth. I'm like, so just tell me, how am I going to lose weight without being on a diet? And I'm not yelling, I'm not screaming, I'm just warning her if she wants to get out of the conversation. But it seems like she wants to stay in the conversation. I'm like, good, please tell me, educate me on how I'm going to lose weight without being on a diet. And then I could see she was stumped at that point. Like like I could see through her mouth and her speech pattern that she was stumped, that she probably has never or very seldomly had someone ask her that question or even debate her recommendation as a physician. And this is where I want you to understand this. When you stand up for yourself in the case of a medical care appointment, I want you to know that as you advocate for yourself, you're one of the few individual who will actually stand up for how you want to be treated. So it's very well possible that your physician, just like mine, will not know how to take this, will not know how to respond to you. Not because they don't want to respond to you, just because they're not used to having people challenge them. And I think this is where we need to also understand the medical system that we live in. For decades, as a society, we've put physician, doctor, medical professional on a pedestal because of how we value education and how we value health. We have almost put them on a pedestal of being gods, being like a different level of human being. And they have been trained. I know this because I was in the same university as them. They were trained as being quote unquote gods. Like they knew everything that everyone didn't know. So for them, it's abnormal to be challenged. So I want you to recognize that as you learn to advocate for yourself, you're probably going to get the same response. And she didn't have an answer. She went into defensive right away. So Stephanie, being a coach, is like, ooh, like she's on defensive mode right now. So I got to be careful how much I push because she can get really angry here. And as I saw that she wasn't able to answer me, I'm like, Mademoiselle, it was a madame. I'm like, Madame, listen, I've been on a diet since the age of 12 years old. Well, not today, but I ended up at the age of 40. So I was on a diet for 25 years. So if you do have the miracle way of losing weight that I haven't figured out in 25 years, by all means, tell me. And by the way, I also have a degree in nutrition. Like, by all means, if there's something I haven't learned there, like, please tell me because like I've done a lot of things here. And I just want to also tell you before you tell me the solution here that if your solution is GLP or bariatric surgery, it's a like, don't even go there discussion. It's an absolute no. So from that standpoint, now tell me how my weight is a problem and tell me how you're suggesting that I solve that problem. And then she started to pursue to say, well, it's a lifestyle thing. And then she went down the path, it's a lifestyle thing. And then it told me, as she was pursuing it, of exercise and drinking water and lifestyle and mental health, I'm like, she really has no clue who I am. She hasn't literally, I spent 25 minutes with the resident before. She hasn't read any of his notes. She doesn't even know what I do for a living. She has no history on me whatsoever. She's telling me all the things I'm already doing in my life, presuming that because of the way that I look, because of the size of my body, I have a very poor lifestyle. And as this calculation was happening in my brain, I'm like, there's no point, Stephanie. There's no point of debating with her. There's no point of trying to like make her feel heard and trying to be heard, trying to educate her on weight neutral and health at every size. Like she won't want to hear anything. because she's not ready for it. She's not equipped for it. She's not ready. And I could feel in myself like a lot of sensation as she was speaking and judging my lifestyle and telling me I wasn't exercising and not drinking enough. I could see my trauma resurfacing. And I want to talk about this. Any of you who's listening to this who say, that's me, that's what happened when I go to the doctor. I want all of us together. And if you're a thin provider listening to this right now, I want you to be aware of that too. Weight stigma is a traumatic experience. Not just in the moment of the doctor visit, not just in the moment of being bullied at school or being told that you're fat and ugly later in life when you're trying to date, all these things, but it's a trauma of you living with yourself and shaming yourself and thinking very bad thoughts about your body every minute of every day. The trauma of living in a fat body in a fat phobic society is not only in the 10 minutes of a doctor's visit. It's the 18 hours a day that you're awake, that you have thousands of thoughts during the day about how wrong your body is and how wrong you are. That's the depth of that traumatic experience. It's a chronic, low-grade traumatic experience. Now, understanding that this is a traumatic experience, healing that will also take time. Like reteaching your nervous system, because that's what trauma is. Trauma is not in the event. Trauma is in how you react to the event and how you experience the event. And that information is encoded into your brain and into your nervous system. And the work of healing trauma, the work of healing weight stigma and internalized fat phobia is to retrain your mind, retrain your body to engage with your body, with your fatness, with the image of your body in a safe way. It's literally to reprogram every part of your brain, your nervous system, to create safety being in your body. And that takes time. And the reason why I know it takes time, it's not because there's a study somewhere, because God forbid there would be any story on healing weight stigma, because we live in a fat phobic society. That will not happen for decades to come for us to have money invested in studying the impact of weight stigma at the individual level. The reason why I know that is because I've coached over 1,000 women in the last 8 years. I've coached myself through it, and I know it's a chronic low-grade trauma that really profoundly, in my eyes, rewire every bit of tissue in you, your nervous system, your brain, on how to react with your weight. So you literally have to undo, in my case, 35 years of low-grade trauma in me. Now, I've been doing this personally for 9 years. I have doing this work for 9 years, yet in that office doctor 2 weeks ago now, I could feel the reactivation of the trauma as my lifestyle was being judged and all the things about how I live my life were being judged. I could feel the sensation arising in my body. I could feel the tingling, in my case, around my rib cage, around my belly. And I knew exactly what would happen. I knew exactly how I would go in full warrior defense mode, attacking, because I know myself that this is the part of the trauma work, is becoming self-aware of how you're going to react. And I've been there before, and I don't want to show up in the world in that way. And I know that that kind of person, with my assessment of how she was talking to me and the way what she was saying to me, like, this is going to take hours for me to get through to her that fat is not a problem. I'm like, I don't want to deal with this right now. And this is where I stop the conversation. And for many of my clients, advocating for yourself means having no conversation whatsoever. They're not ready for that. So it's the beautiful tool that is boundaries. Okay. When you put up a boundary where you don't want to have that conversation with your doctor, that boundary is not meant to judge them. It's not meant to hurt them. A boundary is meant for you to protect yourself. And that's what I did. I put up a boundary. I'm like, I rose my hand at the end of her sentence. I'm like, okay, Marie-Claire, right now I'm asking you to stop this conversation. And I'm asking you from this moment forward in this office and anytime I will see you in the future to not mention my weight. I'm requesting from you that you provide me with weight neutral healthcare. And just in case you don't know what it is, I don't want my weight to be taken into account into your diagnoses. And I want you to offer me treatment as if I lived in a quote unquote normal BMI for your standard. I want you to provide me a treatment plan as if I was in a thin body. Can you do that? You can write all of this. You can write all this, everything that I said. That's what I give my client, like the speech to say, the sentence to say, to put up a boundary as soon as weight is mentioned. Demanding weight neutral health, demanding a treatment plan for a thin body person. Now, if you need help with this, absolutely you can come and coach with me, but you can also, in the show note, we've put the link to some cue card. One of a blogger, a fat activist, Ragen Chastain did. She created those cue card that she gives away for free in order for people to be able to say something in the medical appointment when you feel that the trauma is coming up and you feel that you're going to freeze. Or like me, instead of freezing, you're going to get really angry and you don't want to go there. The cue cards, you can bring them with you during the appointment and actually read from them. So the link is in the show note for that. So after I've put up the boundaries, I demanded weight neutral care. She complied. And again, I think coming back to physician not being used to that, not being used to people getting into an argument with them and being able to have a debate about that. They're not used to people putting a boundary. So they're complying. I did it in a very clean, concise way, very polite, very respectful. So she complies. So we completed the appointment without talking about weight. I got the same treatment as a thin-bodied person. I got some medication, and I got a follow-up appointment with another physician to follow up on the situation. And I was about to leave the office when she said, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And I sat back down, I'm like, "What do you want to ask me?" She's like, "How could I have talked about this differently? Like, how could I have talked about the BMI?" And she was careful not to mention the weight. How could I have talked about it differently so that I could actually address the point? I'm like, very good question. And like, first of all, I'm going to say this to you right now. That's my line of work. So thank you for asking me this question because I'll be able to inform you at a level that probably most people wouldn't. And I appreciate you asking me that question. But the very first step is not to talk about it being the weight differently, is actually for you to read the literature on weight stigma, for you to read the literature about weight and health, and actually getting yourself up to date in research. And then she went blank again because she didn't expect that. And then I could see that again. She wasn't expecting that. I'm like, once you've done this work and updated yourself and understand how weight is not present in most health condition, then perhaps the need for you to talk about, quote, HIT won't be there. And if you do need to talk about it, if you do need to talk about it for whatever reason, I understand there's some forms that needs to be filled out, like do it in a way like your resident did it, right? Acknowledging that this is a systemic issue, that you are required to talk about it, and do it in a very light, soft approach instead of a dominating authoritative space. And take into consideration the person standing in front of you. It is probably sure that this person knows that she lives in and exists in a large body because she lives in that body every day. And most people have tried to do something to lose weight in their life. Start the conversation from that place, acknowledging the difficulty of living in a society that stigmatizes them, that you need to have this conversation with them, and it's going to be a difficult conversation, and you're going to try to be as compassionate as you can, but you need to have this conversation and also acknowledge that they've probably been on a gazillions of diets and they've probably tried, and here they are today. If you do just that, you will change the tone of the conversation you absolutely need to have, if you need to have it. She was very receptive. She was very receptive to me having this conversation with her. And I wanted to share that with you because if you are at that stage of your journey of healing your relationship with your body, with your health, and with food, and you can have that conversation, this is what I call activism at the individual level. Activism is this place where we try to dismantle the real issue, which is the system. We move from doing the work at the individual level to the collective. You, one by one, all of us having those beautiful, informative conversations when we can with our physician will dismantle the system long term. And I know it shouldn't be our work to do. Like, I fully understand and agree with you that it shouldn't be our work to do, but here we are, folks. And I'm into this philosophy of life that I accept what is instead of fighting what is. This is a way of living life that I've learned through accepting my body. I could fight my body. I fought my body actually for 25 years, and it got me to a lot of health issue, depression, anxiety, panic attack, because my body was exhausted to being fought against, and I decided to accept it. And it'll be known that now everything in my life I accept instead of fight. So if we can have those conversations at the individual level while the government and other activists at the bigger level have the conversation systemically with our government, with the university that trains those physicians, and we start changing things collectively and collaboratively, we will change the system. Now, I keep mentioning that you may not be able to have these conversations. And I want to kind of give you kind of a, what could you do to become someone who can have those conversations, become someone who can advocate for yourself, become someone who is able to put up a boundary instead of having to be stigmatized in a medical appointment and tolerating them telling you how bad your body is and how terrible your weight is, and you just staying there, getting smaller and smaller and feeling like you're going to cry. And I want you to be able to say no more and perhaps educate the physician in years to come. How did I got there? How did my client get there? The first thing I want to acknowledge is the word privilege. What I'm about to share with you and how I did this work, how my client do this work to be able to advocate, to become a body ally, to educate physicians and other women is a great part due to our financial privilege. I had the financial privilege when I left the hospital at 39 years old after a severe panic attack to be able to pay for a therapist and to go in therapy for 2 years and then to hire a coach and to hire another coach that taught me skills and skills upon skills upon skills. Here I am, an expert in this field. That's financial privilege. Not everybody can have these private services. I want to say that I have an educational privilege. I have 2 degrees in health science. So not everybody has that, right? I have a race privilege. I am white in America, right? I can have these conversations and not think my life is at risk. So I want to acknowledge these privilege that are in place in my particular identity that allowed me to go to therapy and to hire private coach and to take courses that build up my capacity to have these hard conversations. And at the same time, I know many of you listening to this podcast have these same privilege as me. And I want to invite you, those who are capable of financially hiring a coach to do the work. What is the work, right? It just didn't happen. I'm not special. I'm not born with a special like uniqueness that makes me like special. Hell no. Remember, I was in the hospital at 39 with like a slew of health conditions, panic attack, anxiety, depression, and being stigmatized for my weight all along. So there's nothing special. What I did is invested my financial resources, my time, my energy into learning how to first feel my emotions, like feel the sensation in my body, name the emotion, and be able to be with my emotion. So when a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when I was in the physician office being stigmatized, I was able to name the sensation coming up. I was able to recognize that trauma was being activated in me. And because of my ability to feel my emotion that I've developed in various program and coaching, I was able to name it, to identify, oh my God, trauma's coming up right now. And because of this skill set of being aware of myself, not just my emotion, being aware of my thoughts through thought work, cognitive behavior coaching, and examining myself over the years, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew myself, I knew my pattern, my coping mechanism to know I'm a attacker. When I feel in danger, I attack. And I know how vicious I can get. This is not going to be good. And I know if I let the conversation going, this is exactly what's going to unfold. And it's not going to be a pretty situation. And I don't want to live that. That is the outcome of self-awareness. That is the outcome of emotional maturity, emotional regulation, examining my belief, higher level of self-awareness, mental and emotional work where I was able to identify all of this. That's the work. And being able to be activated over the last 9 years, I've been activated because of my weight, doing body image work, gaining weight, and being able to stay with the activation and build a tolerance, a compassionate approach to the activation of being stigmatized because of my weight. Now, I also want to address, is it fair that as a fat person, we need to do this work? No, we shouldn't have to. We should not have to do this work. Just like the next patient after me was a jolly mid-40 man in a thin body seeing the same 2 doctor who probably didn't have to do half of the work that I had to do just because he was presenting in a thin body. God only knows how he lives his life. Maybe, I don't know, he's drinking, smoking, and partying every night and not sleeping and whatever he's doing. But none of that will be judged upon him because the only reason is he's presenting in the thin body. So, is it fair? No. But is it positive? In my world, it's positive. It used to be a very unfair, negative experience that I used to dread, hate, that I used to constantly overthink about, constantly ruminate and resent for days and weeks after appointments. But I shifted my perspective, and that's available to any of you. The shift in perspective doesn't cost much other than you listening to me and willingly shift your perspective. So for me today, although the emotion came up and I had to do a lot of emotional regulation during and after the appointment, to me, it's a positive experience. And it's a positive experience because through all these weight stigma experience over the years, I was able to build myself up to have this capacity and teach and coach other women in that work. Like to me, this is like, I now have a purpose in this world because of the weight stigma. That's my choice. I'm not saying you have to do the same thing. I'm saying it's available to you. It's available to you to take the things that are unfair and make them a positive in your life and make them something, at least if it can't be positive, it could be neutral. Learn to process your emotion, learn to name your emotion, learns to heal your trauma, learn to put up boundaries, learn to have hard conversation. It's available to you to have that different perspective. And that's my choice. I get that. But it's my choice because I have a goal in life. And my goal is to live a good life, to live a happy life, to enjoy my human experience. And the first 30 so odd years of my life, I made the choice to see weight stigma as unfair, terrible, resented, and my life wasn't that happy. So at 40, I'm like, okay, we're halfway through life. I can continue to make that a bad experience. I can continue to resent it. That's choice number A. But I know exactly what's going to happen. But I don't want that anymore. So what can I do? Choice B became learn to process it, learn to make it a positive experience, learn to grow from it, and make it something that actually can be a good experience in your life. Like learn from it. The experience of stigma is not good, but everything that comes around it in order to make it good is amazing. And I chose at midpoint in my life to do B. Is that something that you want to do? That's why I'm sharing this podcast here to show people, first of all, for anybody listening to this who's not living in a fat body in the context of a medical visit, for you to see the experience of weight stigma in medical care. I want you to experience that. I want you to hear my side of it. And if you live in a fat body, I want you to know there's another option. Now, different level may be available to you based on your privilege, but there is other. This podcast is free. You can do a lot of work, personal work of processing weight stigma, just from listening to the 400 episodes. If you have more facility financially, you can do step number 2, undiet your life. If you have even more financial privilege and you're ready to invest in making your life good, then you can come to one-on-one coaching with myself, with one of my team members, and we can help you do this work just like somebody helped me one day do this work. You can learn to advocate for yourself, and you can learn to be the number one ally for your body. And I'm going to close with that. Everything that I have described in this podcast episode is allyship. And we often hear of allyship being an ally to other people. What about being an ally to yourself? being your number one supporter, your number one cheerleader, your number one protector. And an example of that is putting up a boundary. No, I'm not going to have this conversation, and I demand weight neutral health. That's gold allyship as a fat person in face of a weight stigma medical care provider. You're putting up the boundary that you're not going to tolerate shame and shaming yourself and blaming you. That's allyship. Learning to process the emotion of weight stigma is allyship. So the end result of everything I talked about today and doing the work is advocating for yourself and ultimately becoming your ally to yourself and your body. I hope this episode serves you well. I'm going to give you one more resource. I'm looking at my notes right now and I realized that I forgot to give you a resource. We talked about the cue card from Ragen Chastain. And I also want to tell you, I recorded 3 years ago a podcast episode with a physician, Dr.Maggie on my other podcast. In case you don't know, I have another podcast called Undiet, Your Coaching Podcast. And if you scroll back up to the beginning of that podcast, episode number 24, Navigating a Healthcare Provider Visit, I interviewed her as the physician and how we can have a better relationship with our physician in the context of weight stigma, BMI, and weight neutral health. So that would be another great resource for you. I hope this serves you well, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Hey, my sisters, if you are loving what you are learning on the podcast, you have to come and check out our feminist mentorship masterclasses and our internationally recognized non-diet coaching certification on our website at www.stephaniedote.com/shop. This is where you can get the individual coaching and the support to take the concept thought on the podcast to the next level, embrace our well-being in a way that will expand our collective freedom and power. Come and join myself and other women to learn how to reshape your mind, not your body. I'll see you there.